always hate to follow John Allen, I really do. Our lecture tonight is an important one. All of us got to watch the war for Iraqi freedom on television, but several men, I don't know, some women I guess too, participated in the war, and they have a different outlook that we will, and can tell us some things we didn't know. Two of these gentlemen participated in the Battle of Najaf. Several from Randolph County did. Third one, James here, went over with them, but for health reasons he had to stay in Sinai and didn't get to go to Iraq. The city of Najaf is a city in central Iraq. It's about 100 miles south of Baghdad on the Euphrates River. Population of over 1 million. It was the scene of some of the most significant and intense fighting in the war. It also has the distinction of having the world's largest cemetery and the Golden Dome tomb of Imam Ali. Ali was the son-in-law of Muhammad, as also his cousin, and he succeeded Muhammad on his death, and his assassination precipitated the split between the Sunnis and the Shias in Iraq. So it's a very important city to the Shia Muslims. I'm going to turn it over now to James Damon, let him introduce them. Here you are.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. I'm James Damon, and this is Gordon Thielemier and Chad Overman. We served together in the National Guard unit in Walnut Ridge, Company A, 2nd Battalion, 153rd Infantry, 39th Infantry Brigade for several years. Everybody can probably remember where you were on 9/11. Some of you probably remember where you were when Pearl Harbor hit. We're no exception. When 9/11 hit, the 39th Infantry Brigade in Arkansas is an enhanced infantry brigade, and the National Guard is not what it was in the 1970s when it was a place for people to go to try to avoid Vietnam and different things. The National Guard today is a very active force, particularly the enhanced brigades, and we were no exception. Soon after 9/11, we were mobilized into federal service and received a mission. We were unsure what that mission would be at the time, but our mission was to be to the Sinai Peninsula in 2002. We were mobilized in October of 2001, just a month after 9/11, and were sent to Fort Carson, Colorado as part of the 7th Infantry Division for that mission's training. And the MFO in the Sinai Multinational Force and Observers is a mission that has been ongoing since the Carter administration to enforce the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt following the Arab Wars in the 1970s. We made history in the 39th Brigade because we were the first National Guard battalion to take on that mission. We relieved the 101st Airborne Division's Battalion of Infantry so that they could deploy to Afghanistan for operations against the Taliban and so on and so forth. It was a really unique training experience in Fort Carson. One of the things that I remember most about, and I'll say this all about 9/11, when we were leaving Walnut Ridge to deploy to Fort Carson, I will never forget all of the people that were on the sides of the roads with American flags waving and on the overpasses as we left on the charter buses for Fort Carson. At that point in time, I think any of us were ready to charge a machine gun nest. That was a memorable experience. The training in Fort Carson was pretty decent. Like I said, our mission there was to observe and report. The Sinai was a dangerous place. There were landmines, and it was after 9/11, so it wasn't the safest place to be. but basically it was a cakewalk compared to what Chad and Gordy went through in Iraq 2 years later. We spent 6 months in the Sinai. We all three, there were 4 of us in our squad in the Sinai from Pocahontas. And also want to recognize Sergeant Archie Barber in the audience. He was in the Sinai with us as well. But we were all three on a remote site in northern Sinai Peninsula, and it was SEC 6, Control 6, and we were Sergeant Thielemier was the site commander, and I was one of his TOC NCOs, and we were one of the main communication sites for our company in operation. And we were on a mountain about 800 feet, wouldn't you say, Chad? About 800 feet high? It was actually cold there, and you could actually see Mount Sinai from our location there. It was it had its own beauty, and the Gulf of Aqaba traversed the mountain range below us there. To tell you how high it was, we had a gentleman in our squad. We had 2. Our medic was a star quarterback from Searcy High School, and we had another guy in our squad from Pocahontas named Mike Rowland. And one day they were arguing about who could throw the football the furthest. And the quarterback was mouthing back and forth, and they were at each other. So finally the quarterback took the bet, and he throws the football as far as he can, and he threw it a long ways. He really did. And then when it was Mike's turn, he just simply picked up the ball and walked to the edge of the mountain and threw it off the side of the mountain. So he won the bet. Anyway, while we were in Egypt, we became familiar with a lot more technology as far as our weapon systems, different training. Of course, our mission. We did get to visit a few places while we were there. We went to the pyramids, and for those of you who might have an ambition of going there at some point someday, they're really neat to look at, but I think we spent, 20 minutes at the pyramids, and the beggars were terrible. But we did get to visit the museum in Cairo, and several of us did go into Israel as well. But it was a real neat experience. First time for most of us to be away from our families. Most people don't understand about the Guard and Reserves. One of the hardest things to deal with. I was a young single man at the time with no children. Sergeant Thielemier has made 3 deployments in the course of about 8 years. You made 3 deployments, and it takes a toll on your family. It really does. You leave your civilian job, and you leave your families behind. And like I said, we were in the infantry. We weren't stacking supplies. We were the ones behind the weapons. So, but anyway, after we returned from Egypt, and we can talk more about that later, and we have pictures of our trip to Egypt, our tour in Egypt. We did meet Vice President Dick Cheney. Came over on his Medes Peace Conference while we were there. Ironically enough, the Iraqi War started 6 months later. But anyway, we did meet Cheney. He came there to speak, and we finished our deployment. We came back in July of 2002. We were on leave until September. The following summer at annual training. Prior to this time, we had always trained in the woods like we were in Vietnam doing infantry stuff. But the following summer camp, we actually had a unique training experience where we were in an urban environment working with civilians on the battlefield. And it was pretty obvious that we were destined for other things. Less than 2 years later, it was September of 2003 that we were mobilized for Operation Iraqi Freedom. Again, thinking about people with families like Gordy. I think Chad had just gotten married, several of our people. This was immediately after, basically, we'd gotten back. We were on active duty for nearly a year on the last deployment. Anyway, we went through the soldiers' readiness processing. I went through the processing in Little Rock, actually was fitted for the body armor. I was flagged on a medical in the soldiers' readiness processing. I did not make the deployment, and that essentially ended my military career. However, these 2 gentlemen and many of my other brothers went on to fight in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Due to the fact that we had just been to Egypt, several of them, there was a federal law at the time where you can only be deployed so many consecutive months, or
4 months in a 2-year period.
24 months in a 2-year period. And so several of these guys, including Gordy and Chad, were able to come home after about 9 months. But for those of you that have never been deployed, particularly in a hostile area, 9 months may go by really quick here, but it goes by really, really slow over there. And several of our brothers were there for an entire year. And again, in 2008, Sergeant Thielemier made another deployment to Iraq. But at this time, I want to let them talk to you about Iraq and training in Fort Hood, Texas, and I'll turn it over to them. Gordy or Chad?
You want to do it? I'm not very good at this, so but we did. What'd you say? In 2003, we got mobilized. Yes, we went to Fort Hood, Texas. Spent a couple months there. Then we went to Fort Pope, Louisiana. The armpit of the Army or whatever it is. Don't recommend going there. We went there for another month and a half, and then we deployed to Iraq. We went into Kuwait. We trained up in Kuwait for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then it was time to go to the box. You know, the real thing. Didn't know what to expect. Took off that afternoon, and we got to the Kuwaiti border. We had to spend the night there. We waited and went into Iraq. We were going to Baghdad. We knew where we were going. Camp Cook, Taji, whatever they call it. It's north of Baghdad. We went there, but we had a little area. We went there first, and then we got moved to our actual FOB, I guess you could call it, forward operating base, which was on the Euphrates. It was downtown Baghdad in Ottomia. And they said Ottomia was like the population was 1.1 million just in this area. Wow. So, and there's a book out on that. Chad just read the book. He can tell you some of that. But about another unit that was there. Your whole squad from Pocahontas. Right. Our whole squad was from Pocahontas. When we do the train up, my whole squad was from right here in Randolph County.
Randolph County, yeah.
There was Jimmy Ingram. He lives here. Daniel Carr. I don't know if you know him. They both work for the Highway Department. Tim Collins, which now he's a police officer in Paragould. And then there was Michael Hurt, which I don't think he lives here anymore. You know. Well, we had Craig Mitchell, but he was from Forest City. And then I picked up another guy from West Virginia as my gunner. And we started doing patrols out of Fort Apache and Ottomia. Sorry. And then our platoon, we were a company of light vehicles, Humvees, and we were swapped. Our platoon was swapped for a platoon of heavy vehicles, which is tanks. So we were attached to a tank unit, and a platoon of those tanks came to our company. So it was a whole new ball game for us. We didn't know anyone. We were actually attached to a active duty Army unit, 27 Cav, out of Fort Hood, Texas, 1st Cavalry Division. Out of Fort Hood, Texas, and we really fit in with those guys because, you know, when you think about it, you think a lot of National Guard, you think a lot of regular Army guys, all they know is the Army. But you take a bunch of National Guard guys, put them together, you know everything. You've got plumbers, you've got electricians, you know, you've got surveyors, you got everything. And they really depended on us because, you know, all they did was Army stuff. They, you know, they needed something, they hollered at us. So, don't let me forget anything. But we did, when we got moved, we kind of moved back to Taji. We lived, well, actually we lived everywhere. Yeah. We were the Beverly Hillbillies for a while, the Gypsies. We were moving everywhere, but we ended up at Taji, patrolling out of there. And when I say patrolling, what we did out of there, it'd be just like everybody asked me, well, what'd you do? Well, it'd be like going over here in the Black River Bottoms. That's how the country was. You know, they had ditches. We'd run up and down the ditches and, you know, just patrolling, looking for bad guys, or we see civilians, we'd mingle with them and we'd ask them, you know, about the bad guys or good guys. Yes, ma'am.
Corey, I want to ask you, you were talking about your training earlier. Did you all have any specialized training pertaining to the culture of the area over there, you know, like do's and don'ts, and not to insult them by doing thus and so and that sort of thing?
We went through a was it, I don't know if that deployment or the second deployment, but we went through a class, you know, for that stuff, and to speak the language, just to speak enough of their language. But I don't remember it anymore. But, you know, yeah, they would, even the Sinai, they would tell us, you know, how to shake their hands, and then put your hand on your heart, or, you know, after you shake their hand, you
Don't show the bottom of your feet.
don't show the bottom of your feet. That's disrespect, you know. It was interesting stuff. But
Yeah, let me see this. Yeah, to help answer that question, like our deployment to the Sinai, yes, but when they deployed in '04, we always have rules of engagement, whatever theater of operation we are, and they vary from theater to theater and actually mission to mission. And he will tell you that the rules of engagement varied significantly from the deployment in 2004 to 2008. And in 2004, in Najaf, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe it was Solder City, in one area, if someone was on a cell phone, you were ordered to use deadly force. So they weren't really concerned in 2004 about winning. Well, I shouldn't say they weren't concerned about it, but their primary mission was combat, and so they vary from mission to mission about what they train you on there.
But we did do our patrolling, and then I guess it was early August. We got the word, you know, Al-Sadar, his army. What was his army? He had an army.
The Al-Mahdi army, they basically wore like green and black all over. You might have seen them on the news during that time. But Muqtada al-Sadr, he was basically just a young hothead who didn't get a position of power when the Americans showed up. So he was kind of at odds with the Americans because of that. His dad was well known in the area, well respected, but his dad had been killed years before, and he was just basically wanting power. But yeah, he had holed himself up in the mosque in Najaf, and was using it as a base of operations to go out and you know, basically attack the Americans that were in the area. And the Iraqi government wanted the Americans to help them get him out of the area, and so the Marines were started it out. They had a couple battalions already there, and they started realizing that there was a lot of guys holed up in this area. About 3,000 militia guys were in this one you know, mile square area, and so they decided to ask the help from the regular army. So the regular army sent 2 battalions down, and we were attached to one of them battalions.
Yeah, that was early August, and then about, you know, late August we got there. Well, not late August, because
August 7th.
had to be early August. Yeah, we got there, got to Najaf. Yeah, well, I'm getting to that. But we got there, took a, you know, I can't give a lot of details. My mom's sitting here, so. But we did, went into that city, you know, knowing what was coming, and it was an intense battle getting in there. And like Chad said, August 13th, Friday the 13th, we'll never forget that day. We were moving, but we just kept advancing on that mosque. We were eventually going to take the mosque. That what was his name? Well, Al-Sadr, but the imam that Muhammad's. Yeah, the Golden Dome. Yeah.
He got it.
We were moving to that, you know, and I think the battle was maybe 20 days, something like that. But it's very intense, and there's a picture right here. When we get done, maybe everybody can look at. But that we had moved up on this hotel, and we cleared it, got in it and cleared it, and we were using it for the snipers actually. Well, about 2 days after we were in there, they said, "Hey, there's a ceasefire. Move out." So we moved back out. Another 2 days went by, and they said, "Hey, you're going back in." Ceasefire lifted. So we went back to that same spot. And I would have to say that's probably the scaredest of the whole deployment I was, because we got to the door. The door was chained up. We thought, oh my gosh, you know. So we got the lock open with that shotgun. That's where the picture came from. We shot it with a shotgun, hit the guy in the hand. And he's reacting to that. But then we got the chain off. They had barricaded the door from the inside with like concrete. I thought, uh-oh, it's fixing to get bad. But we got in. There wasn't anyone in there, so but we stayed there. And for a while. But anything else? We kept moving around, and we were tightening the noose is what we were doing around that mosque, you know, to get that army, to kill that army, you know.
Yeah, I just got through reading a book about the Battle of Najaf, and you can find it on Amazon. It's called The Battle for the City of the Dead. And because of that, Najaf has the largest cemetery in the world. It's actually 12 square miles, which is probably bigger than Pocahontas. But there's 5 million people, 5 million tombs there, and it's spread out forever and ever. You can actually look at YouTube and see videos of it. It's pretty neat. But anyways, the very religious city, the second most religious city next to Mecca, and so for the whole battle was kind of obstructed by politics, because we couldn't even hardly fire a rifle towards the mosque unless we called up and got approval by hire. And if we fired anything larger than a certain, I forget which one it was, probably an anti-tank weapon, it took like an hour to get approved because they'd have to call the general and the Pentagon, you know, before they'd approve it. And actually, the last few days we were there ended up being a hole put in the top of the mosque there, and that just about ended things, you know. Well, anyways, going on to the end of the story, just kind of give you about what happened. The day before the Marines and the Iraqi army was going to go in and take the inside of the mosque, the Muqtada al-Sadr negotiated peace because he knew it was coming down, and they were allowed to lay their weapons down and walk out of the city. Of course, what they did was they stored their weapons in somebody's house around the area, and then later went back and got them. So, and now that same Muqtada al-Sadr is still giving us problems in Iraq. In fact, a lot of his followers have probably gone to ISIS and so on, which is, you know, we had the noose around him. All of our units were within 100 yards of the mosque. There was three battalions that were actually the line companies, and all three of us, we were in the lead, pretty much our platoon. We took the house, you know, the first, our squad was the first one inside this little net that we had. It's called the exclusion zone, and it was 400 meters radius around the mosque. And so basically we had him against the wall. We could have gone in and captured him, and then he negotiated peace, you know, and that's just, and then they basically lived to fight another day with his followers, you know, and that's, his followers, a lot of people ask, well, who were they? Were they Iraqi army? They weren't. They were teenagers recruited from Sadr City, which is a part of the suburbs and a slum in Baghdad. And basically, they didn't have jobs, and they were promised a lot. You know, basically, they were promised a lot to come down and fight us around the mosque. So they had no skills. I mean, we were shot at by 30 or 40 mortar rounds, you know, 30 or 40 RPGs, just our vehicle, you know, and after a while, it got to where you'd be eating lunch in your vehicle and an RPG would hit you, and all you do is look up and say, "Did you see the guy?" "No, we didn't see the guy," and that was all you did, because they would basically just hold the RPG or the weapon around the corner and fire it without looking, and so that wasn't very effective, you know. Luckily, we only had a couple guys in our platoon get injured. Not one person in our whole battalion got killed. There was about 14 guys got killed in that 20 days out of all of the Army and Marines. But God was really looking out for us. We had some really close calls. I won't go into too many details, but me and Gordy were in a line with about 8 guys. And we were shot from 15 foot away with an AK-47, a fully automatic AK-47. And I could see the rounds going by my left knee about 18 inches away. And I knew Gordy was like 2 people behind me. And not one of us, we were 8 people in a line, and not one person got hit. And like I said, that was from 15 foot away, you know.
Then he threw the magazine at us. He won't do it again.
One situation in Iraq, the second day we were there, was actually Friday the 13th, we were sent to go towards the mosque and clear a building and set up in that building. Well, as soon as Gordy was in the lead, he was in the lead vehicle, and Jimmy Ingram was driving. and I was in the third vehicle, and we started down, and I actually propped my video camera up on the radio mount because I knew something was going to happen, you know. And the bad thing is my video camera fell off the first 100 yards, and I didn't record anything. But Gordy's, all of a sudden, an explosion went off, and Gordy's truck was just enveloped in a black cloud, and they had set off an IED. And then from that point on, it was another 200, 300 yards. We drove forward in a hail of gunfire, basically. RPGs were flying over our heads, and they were shooting at us. And the good thing was our vehicles were up armored. They had 2-inch glass and so on. We kind of got bottlenecked turning around trying to get out of there, and it seemed like an eternity, even though it was just a few minutes. We made it back out of there, and they decided to do something different. But anyways, after that little run down towards the Moss, I think they decided we were up against a lot more than they expected. So then they started bringing in Apache helicopters and F-16s and C-130 gunships and everything. And so they actually...
Just want to say on that note, I heard it a lot of times, the divine intervention. I don't know how many times that happened to us. But when Chad talked about the IED, what had happened, the tanks were supposed to go down. We had 2 tanks. They were going to go down and secure this, you know, and then we were going to go up, stop, get out of the vehicle, and take this building. And I was the lead vehicle and got down there, and I don't know where the tanks went. I still don't know where they went. Nobody, you know. But if the tanks would have stopped, we would have stopped and got out of those vehicles to go take this building, and that would have been all that gunfire Chad's talking about. I mean, just, you know, something the tanks went somewhere and we didn't stop at the right building. We just decided to go down and come back out, get out of there, you know. So, but I just want to say that.
Does anybody have any questions?
Well, let's tell them about You're probably wondering, but a lot of it, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of these missions and operations were conducted at night. Today in the modern infantry, we use night vision extensively, and we had one mono. That's what you had, wasn't it? The one mono lens night vision. This was the weapon, primary weapon system that would have been carried. This is an M4 carbine, which is a cut down M16. As you can see, it's got something here. That's an M68 red dot sight that they had on their weapons in Iraq. We'd be glad to turn that on for you afterwards if you want to look through it. They were also equipped with what they call a PAC-4 Charlie, which was a laser that could only be seen with night vision, and it made the weapon system much more effective. So when Chad was talking about the rounds going by his leg, it was at nighttime, and what he was seeing was tracer rounds through his night vision. But what I wanted you guys to comment on about the Battle of Najaf a little bit was to tell them about how how you would paint targets with lasers for the A-10s. And was that you that was telling me that, or was that someone else? They would paint the targets with lasers?
You had the PAC-4 Charlie?
For close air support, and you could paint those targets, and the pilot, he was telling me about the pilot, talking to the pilot on the radio, and they would come in and destroy those targets. So it's a technological age as far as weaponry, and all that is wonderful as long as you have plenty of batteries. So a little bit about the 39th Brigade before I turn it back over that I forgot to mention. 39th Brigade is a very historic infantry brigade here in Arkansas. The unit crest on our uniform has many significances here, and as you can see, there's a polar bear on the unit crest. That's from World War II. The 153rd Infantry was mobilized and federalized into service during World War II, and my great uncle was a master sergeant in the 153rd Infantry and was in the Aleutian Islands, and this was his fighting knife that he carried, and you can see the polar bear, and I actually carried that on the Sinai deployment. But like I said, another thing I wanted to comment on, and they're not going to tell you, but both of these gentlemen here received the Bronze Star for their service in Iraq. And they were in some extremely hard fighting. And I can tell you a quick story about another friend of ours, a brother of ours, that was not where they were at, but at another place, who was with the same unit. The 39th Brigade was extremely effective in Iraq in 2004, and in the regular service, the 1st Cavalry Division and the regular Army was very impressed. And Sergeant First Class Ritchie, a friend of ours, was a platoon sergeant of 2nd Platoon, and was approached by a general officer from the 1st Cavalry Division, the 2nd 27 Cav, one day, and it just so happened that Sergeant First Class Ritchie was the highest ranking NCO there. So the general started asking him random questions, and he was complimenting them on how effective they were in Iraq, and he asked Sergeant Ritchie why did he think they were so effective. And you'd have to know Sergeant Ritchie, but and he was speaking on behalf of our 2 deployments, Egypt and Iraq, and he said, well, sir, we're all from northeast Arkansas, and we've missed 2 duck hunts, a deer hunt, and a turkey hunt. We're going to shoot something.
Just to give you a little perspective, a lot of people ask you, you know, what did the Iraqi people think of us? During Najaf, we actually set up at the end of it as checkpoints outside of Najaf to keep the vehicles from leaving with weapons. And we had so many people thank us for kicking the Mahdi army out of their city because they were basically just so cutthroat. And so the average, I mean, there's over a million people in Najaf, and you know, yes, we had 3,000 militia guys up against us, but the majority of Iraqis are, you know, just like you and I, wanting to have a better life for themselves and their children. Iraq, people think, you know, you're getting shot at every day when you're in Iraq, and it wasn't the case. We were actually there for 2.5 months before we even had any kind of engagement. We would be downtown Baghdad every single day, doing patrols and driving through the city. And what's ironic, and you know, we talk about the media, and one time I actually flew over Baghdad, and one day, and I landed at Taji, and I got on the computer lab, and the headline on Yahoo Headlines said, "Baghdad ablaze." And I had just flown over the city, and I knew it wasn't on fire, you know. But the sensationalized story, you know, they just had to put that out. Yes, there might have been a fire or a car bomb in one corner of the city, but it's just like if you're in Memphis and there's a murder on one side of the city, you don't know anything about it unless you watch the news. Well, they want people to read the article because it sounds so cool, you know, and dramatic. So, you know, like I said, most of Baghdad was, and yes, guys were getting killed right and left, but it's also a big country, and you know, but actually, if you do that, I mean, and like I said, there was a lot of guys getting killed, but a lot of people, you know, we'd spent several months there without any engagements, and then Najaf happened, and we had pretty much 3 weeks solid there.
Tell them about you meeting President Bush at Fort Hood.
Oh yeah, in Hood we got to have a meal with President Bush, and we've been eating pretty good chow, pretty good, you know, for a while there. They would actually bring us pretty good food, and everyone knows what an MRE is. It's a meal ready to eat. Well, Bush comes along and he says, I want to eat an MRE with the troops. So we got to eat an MRE with him, and we've been eating pretty good food for a while. And then when he shows up, we eat an MRE at the table with him, you know. So it's just kind of funny. It was all politics there, you know. So.
And in the Sinai, that Dick Cheney was there, and we got to meet him, shake his hand, ate at the chow hall with him. Anything else? Battle in the Najaf.
Did you all have an MRE cookbook?
Cookbook?
What you could take from different packets and put together to make different things.
We was in the infantry. We was lucky to have a heater in it.
It was, you did a lot of bartering with those, you know. If you didn't like peanut butter, you might want their cheese, so you save 2 or 3 peanut butters to get a cheese, you know. Any questions on the Battle of Najaf? I guess.
Any questions about their experiences in Iraq or the Sinai? That was an interesting mission. It's not as exciting to talk about, but it was unique in itself. We'd be glad to answer any questions. I will comment on the MRE for those of you who don't know. They are, well, how should I say it politely? Yeah. They gum you up pretty bad. So. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was wondering where you were quartered, both
experience in the Sinai and during the battle?
Well, in the Sinai, we were quartered at South Camp for about 3 weeks at a time, which was one of the main bases there for the Multinational Force and Observers. We had like FEMA trailers for barracks with 35-year-old air conditioners that would freeze up at night, so you would have to unplug them and let them thaw out and plug them back in. It was 125 degrees there in the daytime, and I remember when we flew into Ramstein Air Base in Germany, we'd left the Sinai at 120 degrees, and 4 hours later we were in Germany. It was 54 degrees. It was wonderful. The same on the remote sites when we were out there on the Sinai. Gordy was the site commander. We had to have all of our water and our fuel hauled in. The toilets were primitive. We had like FEMA trailer type barracks there as well, and we actually liked it better there than we did back at the main base because we had our own cook, and he was a good cook. And we could order anything we wanted to eat. And even on the 4th of July, we had a homemade ice cream machine sent over. And I think we had barbecue ribs and all kinds of good chow out there. But they didn't mess with you out there. But when you went back to the main base, they always had find something to mess with you. Talk to them about quartered in Iraq. Tell them about how you stayed in. Didn't you stay in like some of the palaces and different things? Or some of the guys did?
Yeah, we stayed at, on the FOB. It was just the regular... trailers, FEMA trailers like that. But when we Fort Apache, which was a FOB, it was a palace. Uday, Kusei, but that had been one that they had bombed. I mean, we lived on one end of it, but the other end was, they dropped 2 or 3 500-pound bombs. Wasn't much left, you know. There's some pictures here that I brought, if you don't mind. Yeah. You see one with the swimming pool?
It's over here.
Yeah. This one right here, we had just pulled into that base. We were on the other side of the building, and they mortared it. And the mortar rounds hit here. I don't know if you can really tell right here. That's a live mortar round laying in the pool. But it was pretty exciting. We think it was one of their TRPs, their target reference point, after a while. So, but then we stayed at Camp Volunteer. It was south of Baghdad, by Olympic area. I guess they'd had the Olympics there. They trained for the Olympics at one time. We stayed in it. Where else did we stay? In the Green Zone, we were there. One of these pictures is a big hotel, or it's got me on the top of it. Here we go again. I think it's here. Yeah, that's on top of the hotel where all the journalists stayed at the beginning of the war. You know, if you saw the beginning of the war, you saw all the rounds going off. That was that hotel right there. It's where all those reporters were at. I've got another picture of it, but I didn't bring it. But I was on top of it, where they were at one time.
Did y'all get to see Saddam Hussein's palace that they bombed and took over?
We went to...
Was that in Baghdad?
Was in the Green Zone.
There was some in the Green Zone, but there was Camp Victory by the airport. There was a nice palace. It had to be his. We didn't get to go in it, but we got to see it.
Nice.
It was real nice. I mean, from the distance, but it had a long walkway, surrounded by water. It was.
What is this picture with the cone-looking thing?
The Olympics.
It was at the Olympic training state. Yeah. Just we thought it was neat, and we drove up there and got our picture by it. Wasn't getting harassed at the time. That was right beside Solder City. I think if you crossed the street, you was actually in Solder City.
How'd y'all get along with the common people in the town, in the city there?
Most of them really liked us. They would talk to you, which talked the best they can. But we noticed a lot of youngsters could really speak English, so you could really talk to them.
Did the Army allow y'all to socialize with them?
You didn't have a choice. I mean, it was so crowded. We'd go down the street, and we'd have to get out of our vehicles to get vehicles out of the way so we could go through. And then sometimes we'd just do a patrol and mingle with them. I've got pictures of 4 or 5 kids on their backs. I'm standing there with them. But now
we had to drive down the center of the street to avoid IEDs that were on the edge, and so people had to get out of our way in a hurry, and I think that maybe made people a little bit mad. You can understand if you were in Pocahontas and someone comes up behind you at a high rate of speed and makes you move over, but that was because IEDs was the most deadly thing in Iraq at that time, because they would plant them on the side of the road like that. So, and then when we first got there, we'd hit these one-way streets because we can't read the signs very well. So we'd have a convoy of 4 or 5 Humvees in a row, and we'd start going down a one-way street and encounter people coming towards us. Well, we weren't about to back up, so we'd have to dismount and back up a line of vehicles to get through there. You know, being it's their city, but we didn't know the street signs. So, and then in Najaf, we stayed in our Humvees actually for we commandeered a few schools that were abandoned and a few hotels. We basically hopped from building to building to try to get closer and closer to the mosque, and then sometimes we'd stay in our hotels. I mean, our Humvees. And we didn't get any showers during that whole 3 weeks, I don't think. I think we found a garden hose that was working one time in somebody's building, and we took a bath out of it.
My brother-in-law was over in Vietnam, and he was talking about the base that they were all at, that every night they would bomb the base. The next morning, they would rebuild the base, and here they'd come again the next night and bomb again. Did they do that to you guys over there?
They would, well, at Fort Apache, the mortars, they took mortars quite often, but that's part of going downtown doing your patrols. They would put out OPs, observation posts, with snipers, and they may lay there for 24 hours, and they would catch these guys shooting mortars at their base. They took a lot of mortars.
What does IED stand for?
Improvised explosive device. Explosive device.
I have a question. Why does everything have to be like IED, OP, everything?
All those acronyms, that's just Army.
That's mainly for the radio traffic on the radio.
Everybody in the Army had a P-38. Little can
That's just the way they do it.
That was before my time.
Before we MRE, we got cans. And your P-38, that was your little can opener. You wore it on your dog tag.
One of the things that I wanted to really drive home here this evening was most people don't realize there's many veterans from Randolph County served in all the wars, and we thank them for their service. But most people don't realize how many guys from here served together overseas. And that really helped a lot, even in the Sinai, just having that connection with people that were from the same town and the same area. And it can also be devastating under unfortunate circumstances. The 29th Infantry Division in Normandy was all from the same community in Virginia, and hundreds of them lost their lives. The Bedford boys. Fortunately, these men didn't have to experience that aspect of it. But that's what I really wanted to drive home, was for everyone to know that there were people from here that served together, and you just don't have that. You don't hear about that very often. So
I wanted to ask, did the call of y'all come back? Did everybody come back from here?
Yeah.
When y'all
Brought everybody home.
Did you lose a couple that were attached to you after y'all left?
I think the actual company lost one guy in a mortar attack at Fort Apache. He was one of those that was attached. When I was talking about we got swapped out for a platoon of tanks. There was one that didn't come home. What was I going to say? Oh, James was talking about the being close family or close. Everyone from Randolph County. I was usually pretty laid back leader. But when we were in Fort Hood training, we got a little lax, so I had to get on my guys. And everybody being from Pocahontas, I told them, hey, you better pay attention and learn this stuff, because it's going to save your life, my life, or whatever. And I said, I don't want to go back to Pocahontas and see your family in Walmart. And something happened to you, And much less, I don't want you to see my wife in Walmart thinking, what could you have done? Training, So, pay attention, Any other questions? Comments?
Because you were from the same place, and probably a lot of you had grown up together, did that help with being able to sort of read each other when you're out there?
Well, we were all in the same unit down there.
Same culture,
yeah. Didn't really grow up together. We were all different ages, but just the same area. We knew a lot of the same people.
One story, some of you guys may know, we pulled into Kuwait and they didn't have up armor Humvees for us, so we were going to have to make the trek to Baghdad with just regular Humvees. And we found a weld shop, and we started, because a lot of us were welders, which was unlike a regular Army unit, so we started trying to weld stuff. Well, they were kind of stingy with the steel. Well, we found a guy at the weld shop that was from Randolph County. What was his name?
Whitmire?
Whitmire, yeah. Anyways, we found out that he was kind of over the weld shop, and once he,
base, the whole,
oh,
the files we were
yeah, he was over the whole base there at Kuwait, and he used to be in our unit in Walnut Ridge, and he was working as a civilian over there. Exactly, and so after we found that out, he gave us all the steel we wanted, all the welding we wanted to do, and so we welded up, steel doors on all our Humvees, and made it all the way to Baghdad, and had them for a couple months before they issued us up-armored Humvees, So that was pretty neat.
And that's, you got to think, we relieved the initial guys that did the invasion. They invaded it without up armor. They were just coming out with the up armor. Yeah. And we had, out of our whole platoon or company, we may have had 10 up armored vehicles. The other 20 were just regular soft-sided. We took steel and put it on them.
Yeah, and IEDs were just starting to come out during that time, and that's why we wanted to up armor our Humvees as best we could.
Then we figured out there's too much weight on them.
Yeah, they were breaking down constantly.
Figured it out.
Tell us a little bit about, we see on TV how the snipers are really effective over there. What was your experience with them using snipers?
Awesome.
Yeah, we actually were attached to like 6 Navy SEAL snipers in the first hotel we cleared in that picture right there. And our job was just to keep them safe, and they went to the top of the hotel, and we thought a mortar round hit every few minutes because they'd fire off a 50 cal machine gun, and it just rattled the whole hotel. It was a big atrium in the center of the hotel, and we did that for 2 or 3 days in a row with those snipers up there firing like that. I later read a report about Najaf, and the snipers accounted for like 109 confirmed kills in that area. So, and what's funny is, in the movies you see guys popping up all the time and you're shooting back. I actually talked to my wife about 2 weeks into the battle, and she had heard about Najaf, and we were there, and I told her, I said, I haven't seen a bad guy yet. Well, which was the truth, but I'd been shot at constantly, but if you saw somebody, you were going to react to them, but you did not see anybody, and they'd shoot stuff at you and you'd shoot back or whatever, but you never saw anybody for the first 2 weeks. And I was actually being honest with her, because they'd mortar us, they'd RPG us, they'd do everything, but you never saw them, because if you did, one of our guys would have taken them out. But it's not like the movies where you have them standing there shooting at you, and you're watching them, So.
Yeah, those snipers, that was our main job. We'd go clear a hotel or a building, whatever, and then bring the snipers in, and then we were their security. They were real effective.
Any other questions?
Just real quick on that sniper, I'm sorry.
Chris Kyle, you ever work?
No, never heard of him. Never heard of him till we got back here, till the movie come out, I guess.
He talks about the Arkansas National Guard in his book, though. He says that they were good country boys, is what he says.
I was just going to say about the snipers, Chad talked about we cleared those buildings, but I remember going downstairs and a Bradley had backed up, and I don't know if you know what a Bradley is. It's a tank that's a troop carrier, but the back goes down and the troops can come out. Well, they brought those snipers to us.
Navy SEAL snipers.
Navy SEAL snipers and Air Force something, but I went down to pick them up and said, come on, we're going in. They wouldn't come out of that Bradley. So, you sure it's clear? Yeah, come on. They would not come out of it, but, different culture. So, and we wasn't walking 6 foot into the building, I'd yell at them, come on, if you're going with me.
I just want to tell you guys thank you, and that we're all proud of you. I'm sure I'll speak for everybody. I think we all feel that.
Appreciate it. But like James was saying there, it's just Randolph County. It's unbelievable, the guys from Randolph County that were in this battle and still are in the battles over there. It's still going on. So.
A lot of veteran history here.
I'm sure, you'll want to come up and look at the artifacts and the pictures and thank them for their service. We appreciate your being here tonight. Next week is the last of this series of lectures we're going to have. Some very old person is going to discuss life in Pocahontas in the 1920s and 30s. And she was here. If she can remember it, we'll prompt you. Thank you all. And, yeah,
I would like to say that if those of you who haven't seen this quilt up here, this is all the boys from Randolph County that have served during World War II. And the ones that have the gold star by their names, of course, are not the ones that didn't have it. There's a lot of history in that quilt right there. Yeah.
How many names is on there?
Oh, goodness, who knows?
It was good. Thank you.
But they're all